I never thought I would be sitting in a doctor's office at 27, hearing the words brain tumor attached to my name. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Doctor Martinez explained that while the tumor was benign, it was pressing against critical areas and needed immediate surgical removal. $85,000. That number echoed in my head as I gripped the armrest of the vinyl chair. My insurance would cover less than half, leaving me with $51,000 I simply did not have. But I was not worried. I had a family who loved me, parents who had always been there. At least that is what I believed. Before I share what happened next, I want to know where you are watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Trust me, you will want to stick around for this one, because what my family did next changed everything I believed about love and loyalty. Driving home from the hospital, my hands trembled on the steering wheel. The 6-week deadline the doctor had given me felt like a ticking bomb in my chest. I needed to call my parents, Marcus and Diana, who had raised me in our comfortable middle-class home in suburban Denver. Dad worked as a certified public accountant for a regional firm, while Mom managed human resources at a local company. They had always been responsible with money saving for emergencies and teaching me the value of hard work. My younger sister, Sophia, was 24 and preparing for her wedding to Alexander, a young tech entrepreneur whose startup had recently gone public. The whole family was excited about the upcoming celebration, but surely they would understand that my health crisis took priority over party planning. I had always been the responsible daughter, the one who got good grades, worked through college, and never asked for much. Sophia had always been the baby, the one who got the latest gadgets and designer clothes. But that never bothered me. Family took care of each other when it mattered most. I pulled into my apartment complex and immediately dialed Mom's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Hi, sweetheart. How did your appointment go today?" I took a deep breath and explained the diagnosis, carefully watching her reaction through her gasps and concerned questions. She asked about the type of tumor, the success rate of the surgery, and whether I was experiencing any symptoms. Her maternal instincts kicked in immediately, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But when I mentioned the cost, the tone of our conversation shifted dramatically. "Honey, you know Sophia's wedding is next month," she said slowly. "We have committed to quite a bit financially for her special day." My stomach dropped as she explained they had already spent $120,000 on wedding expenses and had no liquid savings left for emergencies. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "But Mom, this is my life we are talking about," I managed to say. "Of course, sweetheart. Let me talk to your father about options. Maybe we can figure something out," she replied, but her voice lacked the confidence I desperately needed to hear. "You know how much we love you. We will find a way." I hung up feeling shaken, but still hopeful that Dad would see things differently. Marcus had always been practical and level-headed. Surely he would understand the urgency of my situation and help me find a solution. That weekend, I drove to my childhood home expecting to sit down with both parents and work out a plan. Instead, I walked into what looked like a wedding planning war room. Sophia sat at the dining room table surrounded by fabric samples, flower catalogs, and catering menus. Her laptop open to Pinterest boards filled with elaborate decorations. She looked up and gave me a bright smile. "Gabby, perfect timing. I was just finalizing the menu. We are doing a 7-course tasting with wine pairings. It is going to be $500 per person, but Alexander says we should not compromise on the dining experience." I looked around at the chaos of wedding planning materials and felt completely out of place in my own family home. Mom emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of coffee and pastries, while Dad sat in his recliner with his laptop apparently calculating costs and reviewing vendor contracts. During dinner, I tried to bring up my medical situation again, choosing my words carefully to avoid disrupting the festive mood. But before I could finish explaining the timeline for my surgery, Sophia interrupted me. "But Gabby, my wedding only happens once. Your surgery can wait a few months, right? I mean, you said the tumor is not cancerous. The casual way she dismissed my health crisis left me speechless. I looked at my parents, expecting them to correct her insensitive comment, but instead they exchanged a look that made my blood run cold. The silence stretched uncomfortably long as I realized no one was going to defend the urgency of my situation. After dinner, Dad asked me to follow him to the garage where he kept his tools and workbench. I hoped this meant he wanted to discuss my medical expenses privately, away from wedding talk. Instead, he launched into an explanation about their financial constraints. You have to understand, Gabby Sophia's wedding costs have spiraled beyond what we originally planned. We started with a budget of $80,000, but between the venue upgrade, the destination engagement photos, and all the extras she wanted, we are looking at $150,000 or more. He ran his hands through his graying hair, looking genuinely stressed. You have always been resourceful and independent. You have a good job and excellent credit. You can get a medical loan from the bank. I stared at him in disbelief. Dad, this is brain surgery we are talking about. What if something goes wrong? What if I cannot work for months during recovery? You are strong, Gabby. You have always figured things out. Sophia needs our help more right now because this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. He offered to co-sign a loan for me, which seemed generous, until I realized he was essentially asking me to take on debt that could follow me for years, while they spent what amounted to a house down payment on one day of celebration. I drove home that night with a heavy heart and the beginning of a migraine that I now knew might be related to my tumor. The people I had counted on most were asking me to handle a life-threatening medical crisis on my own while they funded an extravagant party. The next morning, I started researching medical loan options, hoping to find a solution that would not burden my family financially. The interest rates ranged from 12 to 18%, which would mean paying significantly more than the original cost over time. When I called my bank to discuss loan amounts, they explained that while my credit score was excellent, my income alone would not qualify me for $51,000 without additional security or a cosigner. I needed my parents' help more than ever, but every day brought new symptoms that reminded me time was running out. The headaches were becoming more frequent and severe, and I had started experiencing dizzy spells that made it difficult to concentrate at work. My vision would occasionally blur without warning, forcing me to take breaks and sit down until it passed. The stress of my financial situation was making everything worse. Out of curiosity and growing frustration, I started paying attention to Sophia's social media posts about her wedding preparations. What I discovered made me feel physically sick. Her Instagram stories showed a behind-the-scenes look at the elaborate plans my parents were funding. The venue alone was costing $80,000 at the Ritz-Carlton downtown. Her Vera Wang dress had cost $12,000, not including alterations. She had posted photos from a destination engagement shoot in Santorini that cost $25,000 for photography and travel expenses. But the detail that broke my heart was seeing the Harry Winston engagement and wedding ring set that cost $35,000. As I calculated the visible expenses from her posts, I realized my parents had spent well over $200,000 on this wedding. They were not struggling financially because of an emergency. They were choosing to prioritize luxury and appearances over my life. I called my best friend Jessica, who had been checking on me daily since my diagnosis. When I told her about the wedding costs, I had discovered she was furious. Your parents are choosing a party over your life, Gabby. This is not about money. This is about priorities, and their priorities are completely wrong. Jessica offered to help me research more affordable medical options and suggested I confront my parents directly about what I had learned. She reminded me that I had every right to demand an explanation for why they could afford a $200,000 party, but not a life-saving surgery for their daughter. Her support meant everything to me, but it also highlighted how isolated I was feeling from my own family. The people who should have been my biggest advocates were treating my medical emergency like an inconvenient request for spending money. A few days later, I returned to my parents' house with loan documents that required their signatures as co-signers. I had scheduled the visit during what I thought would be a quiet evening, but instead found them meeting with their wedding planner in the living room. The woman was showing them elaborate floral arrangements on her tablet, explaining different centerpiece options. "Your parents are spending more on flowers than most people's entire weddings." She laughed, apparently impressed by their budget. "These centerpieces alone will be $15,000, but they will be absolutely stunning." I waited for them to finish their meeting before approaching with my paperwork. When I explained what I needed, Dad hesitated in a way that made my stomach churn. "What if something happens to you during surgery and we end up stuck with this debt?" he asked. "Medical debts can ruin families financially." Mom nodded in agreement. "Honey, we love you, but Sophia's wedding is a one-time investment in her happiness and future. Medical bills are just unpredictable." I could not believe what I was hearing. "And my life is not an investment worth making?" I asked, my voice rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. Before they could answer, Sophia appeared from upstairs, clearly annoyed by the raised voices. "Can you all please keep it down? I'm trying to finalize my playlist with the DJ, and this arguing is really stressing me out. This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life." Instead of telling Sophia that her sister's health crisis was more important than wedding music, my parents immediately shifted their attention to comforting her. They apologized for the disruption and assured her that everything would be fine. I stood there holding loan documents that would determine whether I could afford to save my own life, and my family was worried about disturbing a phone call about party music. 2 weeks later, I received an invitation to Sophia's final wedding dress fitting, which felt like salt in an open wound. But I decided to attend, hoping that seeing me struggle with my symptoms might help my family understand the urgency of my situation. The bridal boutique was elegant and expensive, with champagne and designer gowns displayed like works of art. Sophia emerged from the fitting room in her Vera Wang creation, looking absolutely radiant. Mom immediately started crying happy tears and taking photos from every angle. While I watched this touching mother-daughter moment, Sophia decided she needed additional accessories. She selected a cathedral-length veil made of imported lace that cost $5,000. Mom did not hesitate to hand over her credit card, despite having just told me days earlier that they had no available funds for emergencies. The sales associate was effusive in her praise. "Your daughter is so lucky to have parents who spare no expense for her special day. Most families have to compromise somewhere, but you have really pulled out all the stops." During the fitting, my tumor symptoms suddenly worsened dramatically. The combination of stress fluorescent lighting and my growing anger triggered severe dizziness that made me grab onto a nearby chair to avoid falling. My vision blurred, and I could feel sweat breaking out across my forehead. Instead of showing concern for my obvious distress, Sophia looked annoyed. "Gabby, you are being dramatic. This is my day, and I need everyone to focus on making it perfect. Can you please try to keep it together?" I realized in that moment that my family had completely dismissed my health crisis. To them, I was an inconvenience who was selfishly trying to draw attention away from Sophia's wedding preparations. I made an excuse about feeling carsick and left the boutique sitting in my car afterward and crying until I had no tears left. 5 days later, I collapsed at my job while presenting a project to clients. My coworkers called an ambulance, and I found myself back in the emergency room, with doctors looking very concerned about my worsening symptoms. Dr. Martinez explained that the tumor was pressing more severely against surrounding tissue. "We need to schedule this surgery within 2 weeks maximum," she said firmly. "Waiting any longer could result in permanent neurological damage." From my hospital bed, I called my parents to update them on this frightening development. I expected them to drop everything and rush to my side, but instead Dad's first response was, "Oh honey, but that is the week before the wedding. Can we postpone the surgery until after Sophia gets married?" Mom chimed in with equal insensitivity. "The timing is just terrible. All our vendors are booked, and we have guests flying in from across the country. Could you ask the doctor about waiting just 2 more weeks? A hospital social worker overheard parts of this conversation and approached me after I hung up. She gently explained that the hospital had payment plan options and charity programs that might help cover my costs. Her kindness was a stark contrast to my family's coldness, and I realized I was going to have to save my own life without their help. That evening, I met with the hospital's financial counselor and learned about resources I had never known existed. There were charity foundations that helped people with medical expenses, payment plans that could spread costs over several years, and even crowdfunding platforms designed specifically for medical emergencies. I decided to start a GoFundMe campaign and tell my story honestly. I explained my diagnosis, the urgency of my surgery, and my financial situation without specifically mentioning my family's choice to prioritize wedding expenses over my health. I reached out to extended family members my parents had not contacted about my situation. Uncle Robert, my father's older brother, called me within hours of receiving my message. He was absolutely outraged when he learned what was happening. "I cannot believe my brother is choosing a party over his daughter's life," he said. "This is not the Marcus I grew up with." Uncle Robert immediately offered to lend me $30,000, and his wife insisted they would not accept repayment. "Family takes care of family when it matters," he said simply. "Your parents have lost sight of what is truly important." I worked extra shifts at my job despite my worsening symptoms, and I sold personal belongings, including my car, replacing it with an older used vehicle. The response to my GoFundMe campaign was overwhelming. Coworkers contributed, neighbors I barely knew donated, and complete strangers shared my story and sent money. Within 10 days, I had raised $45,000. While I was still $6,000 short of my goal, the hospital agreed to accept a payment plan for the remaining balance. I would be able to have my surgery without my parents' financial help or their emotional support. The surgery took place on a Tuesday morning in early September. Uncle Robert and Jessica sat in the waiting room while I was in the operating room for 6 hours. The procedure was completely successful, with Doctor Martinez removing the entire tumor and confirming that all surrounding tissue was healthy. During my 3-day recovery in the hospital, I received flowers cards and visits from the people who had truly shown up for me during this crisis. My parents sent a bouquet with a card that read, "Sorry we could not be there. Wedding preparations are overwhelming. Love you." Their absence during the most frightening experience of my life spoke volumes about their priorities. I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely free from the toxic family dynamic that had made me feel like my needs always came second to Sophia's wants. 2 weeks after my surgery, while I was still recovering at home, Sophia's wedding day arrived. I had recovered enough to attend partly out of curiosity about the event my parents had deemed more important than my life. The ceremony and reception cost had ballooned to $250,000, creating a truly spectacular celebration. The venue was transformed into something out of a fairy tale, with elaborate floral arrangements, crystal chandeliers, and a 7-course dinner that included Wagyu beef and lobster. A 12-piece orchestra played during cocktail hour, followed by a DJ who had flown in from Los Angeles. The open bar featured top-shelf liquor and a champagne tower that cost more than many people's annual salaries. My parents glowed with pride as they walked around the reception, accepting compliments on their beautiful daughter and lavish celebration. They had achieved their goal of throwing a wedding that would be talked about for years to come. During the reception, Mom approached me with a glass of champagne and a bright smile. "Honey, how are you feeling? I'm so sorry we were too busy with wedding preparations to visit you in the hospital. Everything looks beautiful, though, does not it?" I looked at her calmly and replied, "I am alive, no thanks to you." Dad overheard this exchange and frowned. "Don, not be dramatic, Gabriella. Everything worked out fine in the end. You got your surgery, Sophia got her dream wedding, and everyone is happy." "Yes, everything did work out," I agreed. I learned that I can survive anything, including family members who do not prioritize what actually matters in life. I finished my drink, congratulated Sophia on her beautiful wedding, and walked out of the reception feeling more liberated than I had ever felt before. I had faced a life-threatening crisis and emerged stronger, healthier, and wiser about the people who truly deserved a place in my life. Over the following months, I focused on rebuilding my strength and reevaluating my relationships. I cut off financial and emotional dependence on my parents completely. I built stronger connections with Uncle Robert, Jessica, and the community of people who had supported me during my darkest time. When my parents attempted to reconcile with me after the wedding excitement died down, I was willing to maintain a relationship with them, but on completely different terms. I will have a relationship with you, I told them, but it will never be the same. I know exactly where I stand in your list of priorities now. 3 years later, I am thriving both professionally and personally. My health is excellent with regular checkups confirming no sign of tumor recurrence. I was promoted to senior management at my company and have been able to pay off all my medical debt ahead of schedule. Ironically, my parents divorced 18 months after Sophia's wedding, when the massive debt from the celebration created ongoing strain in their marriage. Sophia's marriage to Alexander ended in divorce after 2 years when she discovered he had been cheating with his business partner. The expensive wedding that my family prioritized over my life lasted one evening, but the debt and relationship damage lasted much longer. My surgery saved my life and taught me lessons about self-worth and resilience that have made me a stronger person. I learned that family is not always defined by blood relationships. Sometimes the people who show up during your darkest moments, who prioritize your well-being over their own convenience, are your real family. Uncle Robert and Jessica proved that love is demonstrated through actions, not words. Most importantly, I discovered that my worth as a human being is not negotiable. If someone cannot prioritize your life over their convenience or social status, they do not deserve a place in your future. Setting boundaries with people who claim to love you but consistently choose other priorities is not cruel. It is essential for your own mental and emotional health. That medical crisis taught me what I'm capable of achieving when I stop waiting for other people to validate my worth. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the best discoveries about who you really are and what you can accomplish when you believe in yourself. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever experienced a situation where family members prioritized the wrong things during a crisis? How did you handle it? And what did you learn about yourself? Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family drama and finding your own strength. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they are worth fighting for, even when the people closest to them do not seem to agree. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your life and health are always worth prioritizing, no matter what anyone else says or does. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video.